Abiba's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened, and before she could stop herself, the towel slipped from her trembling hands and landed on the floor. "Oh my God!" she gasped, spinning halfway toward the door. I am so sorry, sir. I didn't know. I thought no one was home. Please forgive me." Her voice was frantic, her body stiff with embarrassment. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. "You." His voice was deep, husky, almost uncertain for once. "Who are you?" The mansion was so silent that morning. Abiba could hear her own footsteps echoing against the marble floor. It was her first day as a maid in the luxurious London estate of Chung-Ae Kim, a billionaire CEO known more for his ice-cold demeanor than for warmth. Everyone at the agency had spoken of him in hushed tones. He was the kind of man who made and broke empires with a single phone call, the kind of man whose presence filled entire boardrooms with fear. Abiba had never met him. She only knew he traveled frequently, and when she was sent here, they told her he was away in Korea visiting family. That thought comforted her as she carried a fresh stack of towels toward the guest bathroom. The house was enormous, intimidatingly so, but she had worked diligently the entire night, scrubbing, polishing, cooking meals to fill the fridge. Her heart swelled with pride at how spotless everything looked. She pushed open the bathroom door gently, humming a soft tune under her breath. And then she froze. The sound of running water, steam curling in the air, and in the middle of it all him. Chung-Ae Kim stood before her, tall, broad-shouldered, droplets sliding down his skin. His dark hair wet and tousled. Completely naked, Abiba's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened, and before she could stop herself, the towels slipped from her trembling hands and landed on the floor. "Oh my God!" she gasped, spinning halfway toward the door. I am so sorry, sir. I didn't know. I thought no one was home. Please forgive me." Her voice was frantic, her body stiff with embarrassment. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. But Chung-Ae he didn't move at first. For a man known to be ruthless, commanding, and composed, he stood shockingly still. His sharp eyes fixed on her as though she had stolen the air from the room. And then, with a quick movement, he grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his waist. His chest rose and fell as though he had just run a mile. "You." His voice was deep, husky, almost uncertain for once. "Who are you?" Abiba kept her gaze down, her words stumbling. "I'm Abiba. The agency sent me. I'm the new maid, sir. I swear I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave right away." But she didn't. She couldn't. Something in his tone rooted her to the spot. Chung-Ae should have been furious. He hated disruptions, hated strangers invading his private world. Yet at that moment anger didn't come. Instead, an unfamiliar sensation struck him. He couldn't take his eyes off her. The woman standing in front of him wasn't draped in designer gowns or painted in expensive perfume like the socialites who threw themselves at him. She was simple, her dark curls tied back, her maid's uniform slightly too big on her slender frame. But her eyes, those deep, expressive eyes, shook him. They carried no agenda, no pretense, just raw honesty, and fear of losing a job she clearly needed. For the first time in years, Chung-Ae Kim, the billionaire CEO who despised elegant women, found himself utterly captivated. And Abiba, still trembling, had no idea she had just awakened something in him that he never thought possible. Abiba spent the rest of that morning in a daze. Her hands shook as she folded linens, her mind replaying the same scene again and again. Why did it have to be me? On my first day, she cringed at the memory of his sharp eyes locking with hers. She half expected the agency to call any moment, telling her she had been fired. But the call never came. Instead, as she dusted the library shelves later that afternoon, she felt it, the weight of his gaze. She turned slightly and saw him standing at the doorway, dressed sharply in a navy suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his presence filling the room like silent thunder. Her heart skipped. "Sir?" she whispered, clutching the duster like a shield. He didn't answer at first. His eyes traced the lines of her face, as if searching for something he couldn't quite name. Finally he spoke, his voice low, controlled. "You cleaned this house?" Abiba swallowed hard. "Why yes, sir. Last night." His gaze shifted briefly to the polished wood, the gleaming floors, the faint scent of freshly cooked food that still lingered. He remembered arriving late the night before, tired from his flight, and noticing the house felt different, warmer, alive. He had even smiled, thinking the agency must have sent some older housekeeper with decades of experience. But now, looking at her, he realized it had been this young woman. "You also cooked?" he asked, his brow raising slightly. Abiba nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. It wasn't part of the job description, but I thought it might help." Chung-Yi's lips curved, just a fraction. Not a smile. Not yet. But something softened. Most women he met tried too hard. Lavish perfumes, fake laughter, constant flattery. But this one, she wasn't trying to impress him at all. She was simply being herself. "You're different," he murmured almost to himself. Abiba blinked, not sure she heard right. "Sir." He straightened suddenly, his cold mask slipping back into place. "Nothing. Continue your work." And just like that, he left the room, leaving her heart pounding and her thoughts spinning. But she didn't see the way his eyes lingered one last time before disappearing down the hall. For the rest of the week it continued. She'd feel his presence before she saw him, watching from across the garden as she hung laundry, pausing in the kitchen doorway as she cooked, his silence heavier than words. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was always with that same sharp curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he wanted to solve. Abiba tried to stay professional, but every time their eyes met, something inside her stirred. Something dangerous. Something she couldn't afford to feel. He was her boss, a billionaire, a man from a world she could never belong to. And yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart betrayed her with every glance. What she didn't know was that Chung-Ae Kim, the man who had rejected countless elegant women, was beginning to crave only her presence. And he couldn't stop asking himself, why her? The following weekend, Chung-Ae's mansion felt heavier than usual. Abiba noticed it in the way he paced the living room, his phone pressed tightly to his ear, his voice clipped with impatience. She didn't mean to listen, but she couldn't help catching fragments as she dusted the staircase. "No, mother, I told you, I don't have time for these introductions." A pause. His tone hardened. "I don't care if she's the daughter of a politician. I don't want to meet her. I'm not interested." Abiba froze mid-step, her heart thudding. She had heard rumors from the agency staff before, that Mr. Kim's parents were desperate for him to settle down, that countless wealthy women had paraded themselves in front of him, hoping to be chosen. But he had turned every single one away. "I said no." His voice dropped lower, almost weary. "Stop trying to force this." Moments later, he ended the call, tossing his phone onto the sofa. His eyes flicked up and caught Abiba standing on the stairs. Her face turned red. I wasn't listening, sir. I'm sorry." To her surprise, he didn't snap. Instead, he let out a faint laugh, cold, but with a trace of something human. "You're the first woman who has ever apologized for overhearing. Most pretend not to, then use what they heard later." Abiba looked down, gripping the banister. She wanted to ask him why he hated women who sought him out. She wanted to ask him why he always looked so alone, even in his grand house. But she bit her tongue. It wasn't her place. "Go on," he said softly, waving her back to her work. "Forget what you heard." But she couldn't forget. That evening, as she prepared dinner, two of the mansion's part-time staff arrived, a gardener and another housemaid who occasionally came in. Abiba overheard them whispering in the corridor. "That's the new maid?" the gardener muttered, peeking toward the kitchen. "She won't last long," the other replied with a scoff. "You know Mr. Kim's type. Elegant women, rich, powerful. Not some little agency girl." "True. She's pretty, though. Pretty won't get her a place in his world. She'll be gone by next month." Abiba's hands tightened around the pan she was stirring. Their words stung. Deep down, she knew they were right. She had no business being noticed by a man like Chung Ae. He was a billionaire CEO. She was just Abiba. But she also knew one thing for certain. When she had stumbled into that bathroom, when his eyes had locked with hers, something had changed in the air between them, and no amount of gossip could erase it. Meanwhile, upstairs, Chung-yi sat in his study, staring at his reflection in the glass of the window. His parents' voices echoed in his head, pressuring him, suffocating him. Yet, against his will, another voice kept cutting through. Abiba's soft, trembling voice, her wide, startled eyes, her unshakable honesty. And for the first time in years, Chung-ae Kim began to wonder if he had finally found the one thing money could never buy. The next morning, Abiba entered the grand dining hall as usual to lay out breakfast. She set the silver cutlery neatly, arranged the teapot, and placed warm toast in the basket. It was routine now, though she still made sure every detail was perfect. But today something felt different. Chung-yi was already seated at the head of the long mahogany table, dressed sharply in a charcoal suit. Usually he came down much later. He watched her in silence, his fingers tapping lightly against the table. Abiba shifted nervously, her hands fumbling with the plates. "Good morning, sir," she whispered. His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. "Sit." Abiba's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Yes, sir." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit. Have breakfast." Her breath caught. No employer had ever asked her to sit with them before. It was unthinkable. "I can't, sir. I'm just the maid." "Sit," he repeated, more firmly this time. Reluctantly, she lowered herself into the chair, her back stiff, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt his gaze on her, sharp and assessing. "Eat," he said simply. She hesitated, then reached for a piece of toast, nibbling at it as quietly as possible. Her cheeks burned under his steady stare. Finally, she whispered, "Am I in trouble, sir?" His lips curved faintly, not quite a smile but close. "No, I just wanted to see something." "See what?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those piercing dark eyes. "If you would be honest. Most people around me pretend. They say what they think I want to hear. You don't." Abiba swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. The truth was, she couldn't pretend if she tried. Life had stripped her of that luxury. Chung-yi noticed the flicker of emotion in her eyes. He had seen desperation before, in business rivals, in women desperate to marry into wealth. But this was different. Abiba's honesty came from survival, not ambition, and it intrigued him. Over the next few days, he continued to test her in small ways. One evening, he deliberately left an expensive watch on the counter. When he returned hours later, he found it untouched, polished, in fact, placed carefully in its case. Another time, he casually offered her a generous tip after dinner, far more than her wages. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Thank you, sir, but I already get paid well." And once, late at night, he pretended to be in a foul mood, slamming a door shut. Instead of cowering or fleeing like others would, Abiba quietly brought him a cup of tea, setting it on the table without a word. Each moment drew him closer. She was nothing like the women his parents pushed on him. She wasn't elegant or glittery. She didn't chase his money or his name. She was just real. And that was what scared him most. Because the more he tested her, the more he realized he wasn't in control of his own heart. He was falling for the woman who had seen him at his most vulnerable and hadn't run away. The invitation came on heavy ivory paper, sealed with gold ink. Chung-yi's parents never asked, they demanded. Abiba found it on the hall table while tidying, the words written in elegant calligraphy. "Family dinner, Saturday evening. Attendance required. A guest has been arranged." She placed it carefully on his study desk, trying not to think too much about what it meant. But all evening, as she polished the silverware, her mind wouldn't rest. A guest? A woman, most likely. Someone his parents wanted him to marry. The thought shouldn't have bothered her. He was her boss, a man far above her reach. But still, her chest ached with something she couldn't name. That night, Over dinner, he noticed her silence. "You're unusually quiet," he remarked, lifting his glass. Abiba hesitated, then blurted before she could stop herself, "You're going to the dinner?" His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her. "You saw the invitation." She lowered her gaze. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a faint sigh, he leaned back. "They've arranged another introduction." Her fork clattered softly against her plate. "A woman." He tilted his head, his lips curving into the faintest smirk. "Does it matter?" Her throat tightened. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir. Of course not." But it did matter. More than she wanted to admit. Saturday came. Abiba laid out his suit with steady hands, pressing the fabric so not a wrinkle showed. But inside, her heart twisted with each passing second. When he came downstairs, dressed immaculately, she forced a smile. "You look very sharp, sir." His eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. "Thank you." Then, before leaving, he added something that made her breath catch. "Don't wait up for me." The dinner was everything Chung-Yi despised. A long table filled with crystal glasses and shallow conversations. His parents beamed as they introduced him to a woman in a glittering gown, the daughter of a powerful businessman. She was flawless, practiced, smiling too perfectly. But as she spoke, his mind drifted. He wasn't thinking about her. He was thinking about the maid who hummed softly while cleaning, the maid who brought him tea when he was angry, the maid whose eyes held honesty instead of calculation. Abiba. He didn't realize it until his mother's voice snapped him back. "Chung-Yi, are you even listening?" His jaw tightened. He set down his glass and said firmly, "I'm not interested." His father's expression darkened. His mother sighed. The elegant woman at his side flushed in embarrassment. But Chung-Yi didn't care. His mind was already back at the mansion, where a certain maid was likely curled up in the servants' quarters, convincing herself she had no right to think of him. That night, when he returned, the mansion was dark. But as he passed through the quiet hall, he saw a soft light flickering from the kitchen. There she was, Abiba, half asleep at the table, a book in her lap, her curls loose around her face. She had waited, despite his words. For the first time in years, Chung-Yi felt his chest ache with something warm, something dangerous. He was a man trapped between duty and desire. And for the first time in his life, he didn't want duty to win. The mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet that made even the ticking clock sound loud. Abiba had fallen asleep at the kitchen table, a book still resting open in her hand. Chung-Yi paused in the doorway, watching her. For a man used to boardrooms and polished perfection, the sight of her, soft, unguarded, peaceful, felt almost unreal. He cleared his throat gently. Abiba stirred, blinking herself awake. "Oh, sir, I didn't mean to." She jumped to her feet, embarrassed. "I was just reading a little before bed." "Sit," he said softly, not as a command this time, but as something else, an invitation. Confused, she lowered herself back into the chair. He stepped inside, removing his jacket, his tie loosened at the collar. He looked less like the billionaire CEO in that moment, and more like a man. For a while, silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Why did you take this job?" Abiba blinked. "Why?" "Yes." His dark eyes held hers steadily. "You're young. You're smart. Most women your age are at university or chasing other dreams. But you're here. Why?" Her throat tightened. No one ever asked her that. No one cared enough to. She looked down at her hands, fiddling with the corner of her book. "I didn't have much choice, sir. My parents, they passed away a few years ago. Both of them. Sickness." Her voice trembled slightly, but she pushed through. "After that, it was just me. I've worked anywhere I could, cafes, shops, cleaning agencies. But nothing ever paid enough. When this opportunity came, it felt like a miracle." Chung-Yi's jaw clenched as he listened. He had grown up with wealth, security, every door open to him. Yet here was this woman, sitting across from him, who had faced storms he couldn't imagine, and she still carried herself with grace. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. His voice lacked the coldness it usually held. "That must have been very hard." Abiba gave a small, sad smile. "It was. But I survived. That's what matters." Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither looked away. Something unspoken passed between them, something warm and dangerous. Then she broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to burden you with my story." He shook his head slowly. "You didn't?" I asked. His voice was softer than she had ever heard. And in that moment, Abiba realized she was seeing a side of him no one else did. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the man. And Chung-yi realized something too. The walls he had built around his heart were beginning to crack. The morning was unusually bright in London, with soft sunlight spilling across the city streets. Abiba hadn't expected the day to be any different. Polish the floors, fold the laundry, cook his meals. But when she entered the kitchen, she found him waiting. Chung-yi was already dressed, not in his usual sharp suit, but in a dark sweater and a simple coat, his hair styled more casually than she had ever seen. "Put your shoes on," he said calmly, sipping his coffee. Abiba blinked. "Sir, we're going out." Her heart skipped. "Out? Me? Yes." His gaze flicked to her modest attire. "Change into something comfortable. Nothing formal." Confused but unable to refuse, Abiba hurried to her small room and changed into jeans, a soft blouse, and a coat. When she returned, he was already by the door, car keys in hand. The drive into the city was quiet, except for the hum of the engine. Abiba kept sneaking glances at him, wondering why he had chosen her, of all people, to accompany him. Finally, they stopped outside a cozy old bookstore tucked between a cafe and a flower shop. Its windows were filled with stacked novels, and a faint bell rang when they stepped inside. Abiba's eyes widened. She hadn't been in a bookstore in years. "Pick something," he said simply, his hands in his coat pockets. She turned to him, startled. "Sir, I can't. These are expensive." I didn't ask if you could," he interrupted gently, his gaze steady. "I told you to pick something." Her chest warmed at his words, though she hesitated. Slowly, she wandered the aisles, her fingers brushing along the spines of books. She stopped at the poetry section, her eyes lighting up as she pulled one from the shelf. When she turned, he was watching her with that same intense curiosity. "You like poetry," he stated. She nodded shyly. "Yes, my mother used to read it to me when I was a little girl. It reminds me of her." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with emotion. Then he took the book gently from her hands and carried it to the counter. "I'll take this," he told the shopkeeper. Abiba's eyes stung with unexpected tears. No one had done something so simple, so kind, for her in years. As they left the shop, she hugged the book to her chest. "Thank you, sir. Truly." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable, though his eyes softened. "Stop calling me sir when we're not at the mansion. My name is Chung-yi." Her breath caught. "Chung-yi," she whispered, testing the sound, and for the first time his lips curved into a real smile. But as they walked back to the car, a couple passing by stopped to stare. Whispering began, followed by the subtle click of a phone camera. Abiba stiffened, realizing what it must look like, her, a maid, beside one of the wealthiest CEOs in London. Her heart pounded with dread. And yet, as she glanced at him, Chung-yi's expression remained calm, almost defiant, as though he didn't care who saw them. For Abiba, it was both terrifying and thrilling. It didn't take long. 2 days after their visit to the bookstore, the whispers began. Abiba first noticed it when she returned from the market with groceries. 2 women outside the gate whispered behind cupped hands, their eyes flicking toward her before turning away with knowing smirks. By the next morning, the staff in the mansion had caught on too. The gardener and the part-time made exchanged glances when she passed, their voices hushed but sharp enough to cut. "Have you heard? She went out with him. A maid. Imagine. She's just a distraction." Someone like her doesn't last in his world. Abiba tried to block it out, but the words clung to her like smoke. That evening, as she prepared dinner, her hands shook so much she nearly dropped a plate. She was terrified. If the rumors reached his parents, she would lose her job for sure. Maybe worse. But Chung-yi seemed utterly unfazed. He sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone while she served the meal. Sensing her silence, he finally looked up. "You've been avoiding me," he said simply. Abiba froze. "No, sir. I mean Chung-yi." Her cheeks warmed at the sound of his name. "I've just been busy." His gaze sharpened. "You've heard them talking." Her lips parted, but no words came. "I don't care what they say," he continued, setting his phone down. "Not the staff. Not the strangers. Not even my parents." His voice dropped lower, steadier. "Do you understand?" Her heart thudded painfully. "But I do care," she whispered. "You're a billionaire. Nobody. The world will laugh at me. And you—" She stopped herself, her voice trembling. "You could lose everything if they think I'm trying to take advantage." For the first time, a flicker of anger crossed his face. Not at her, but at the very thought. "Listen to me, Abiba." His tone was commanding yet gentle, pulling her eyes to his. "I've had women chase my money all my life. Women with titles, gowns, and family names. None of them moved me. None of them made me look twice." Her breath caught, her fingers clutching the edge of the table. "And then you walked into my life," he said, his voice almost a whisper now. "You're the first person who's made me feel real." The kitchen fell silent, her heart roaring in her ears. Abiba's lips trembled. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to lean into the warmth of his words. But fear still gnawed at her. Finally, she said softly, "Even if you don't care what they say, I'm scared." Something in his expression softened then. Slowly, he rose from his chair, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "Then let me be the one who takes the weight," he murmured. For the first time, Abiba felt what it was like to be protected. Not pitted, not judged, protected. And it terrified her even more, because she realized her heart was no longer hers to keep. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. I truly appreciate every one of you for supporting this channel and sharing this journey with me. Episode 2 will be out tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when the next episode drops. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to share what is coming next.